Hey scholars, are you ready to look at some more sentences? I know I am. Let's start functional analysis, round 3, clauses. Let's start by looking at a very, very basic sentence. Now, every sentence needs to have two things to be a sentence, unless we're talking about commands, but let's not talk about commands, right? Okay, a sentence has got to have a subject and a verb. So what's our verb here? I hope that is screamingly obvious to you. Running is something you do. And then you say who or what is doing the verb, and that gives you the subject. And in this case, we've got a pronoun. Pronouns do what? What? How many times have I asked that? Pronouns replace nouns. Now, we could call this something else besides a sentence. If we want to use the grammar term, we're going to call this a clause. And I put that Santa Claus on. You know, it's not spelled the same way. We're talking about a clause that has an E in the end. It's more like a clause, like a legal clause or something. But actually, it's not like that either. Grammatically, a clause is a group of words with a subject and a verb that are bound together. Now, you say, why don't we just call it a sentence? Well, we can, and sometimes I'll just use the terms interchangeably. Let's make this a little more festive, shall we? Okay, but when we talk about clauses, we actually have two kind of clauses, one which could be called a sentence and one which wouldn't. So if we're talking about a group of words with a subject and verb that can stand alone as its own sentence, I run, he eats, she dances, we're going to call those independent clauses. They have broken free from their childhood and are now living alone, getting a great income, having a great life as clauses. They can be their own sentence. Okay, so let's take a look at this sentence here. In this case, we've got, I wanted to go, but Johnny wanted to stay. If we start by finding the verbs, what we might notice is that we've actually got more than one of them. Try changing the tense of the sentence. I want to go, but Johnny wants to stay. I will want to go, but Johnny will want to stay. So we've got a verb here. That's an action verb, something you do, right? And then we've got another verb here, something you do. All right, so who wants to go? I want to go. Okay, and who wants to stay? Well, Johnny wants to stay. So look at this. We've actually got two little subject verb pairs here. I guess I could label that as a noun and I could label that as a pronoun, but okay. Now we've got basically two sentences or two independent clauses here, and they're being joined by but, which is one of those coordinating conjunctions. Remember, the job of conjunctions is to join things. Put a little CC here for coordinating conjunction. And then, of course, I could finish out labeling the rest. So we've got some verbals. I want what, subject, verb, what, gives you the direct object. We've got a verbal there, which remember is a verb in disguise, doing the job of a noun, dressing as a noun. I think it's like breaking grammar union rules or something, doing some other part of speech's job. All right, so I'm going to just label that as an infinitive. Remember, infinitives are to plus verb. And then over here, exact same thing. Johnny wanted what? Johnny wanted a cookie. Johnny wanted an apple. Okay, if you can say subject, verb, what, you've got a direct object, which is frequently a noun, but in this case, it's an infinitive doing the job of a noun. So we've got that verbal there. Okay, so what we have here are two independent clauses, two little mini sentences that are being joined by that but. And our sentence is something like this. We've got basically two equal halves here with that little conjunction in the middle. And these two things are equally important in the sentence. I could take out the I wanted to go, and I would still have a sentence, Johnny wanted to stay. Or I could take out Johnny wanted to stay, and I would still have a sentence here with I wanted to go. Now, what coordinating conjunctions do is they say these two things in the sentence are equal. And for coordinating conjunctions, it's a very limited class, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so, the fanboys. Now, one other thing which we'll talk about probably next week here, it's pretty typical if you've got two independent clauses, two little mini sentences being joined by a coordinating conjunction, to put that little comma there just to give your reader that brief pause before they move into the second half of the sentence. Let's see what you can do with this sentence. Amy really liked math, but math had a vendetta against her. First thing you want to do is find the verb and/or verbs. If you're not sure what they are, try changing the tense of the sentence. Amy really likes math, but math has a vendetta against her. You could hear the words change, right? Okay, liked changed to likes. Math had changed to math has. So those are our verbs here. Now, liking is something you do, right? That's an action verb. And had, in some cases, it could be a helping verb, like if you say he had gone or he had run or he had eaten. But we don't have another verb here. We just have had. So this is something you do. Having something can be an action. So we'll label that as an action verb. Okay, then we say who or what liked math? Well, Amy did. And that's a noun. And who or what had a vendetta? Well, that's math. Okay, so yet again, it looks like we've got two little mini sentences, two little independent clauses here that are being joined by this conjunction. It's a coordinated conjunction. And if we wanted, we could actually bracket out these parts here to show that we've got a little clause here, and we've got a little clause here. I'm just going to put little brackets around my clauses. Now I can do the rest of the sentence if I'd like, but again, I've got the core of it taken care of now. So I've got really, that tells how much she liked it, describes a verb, that's an adverb. Amy liked what? Amy liked math. If you've got an answer to that question, you've got a direct object. And math is a thing, right? That's a noun. Okay, math had what? Math had a vendetta. Math always has a vendetta. All right, part of speech there, well, it's a thing, right? That's a noun. A tells us which vendetta. A vendetta. A means one, by the way. Like I have an apple, means you just have one. Okay, and that's an article, which if you want to call it an adjective, doesn't matter to me. Again, article is just like a little subcategory there. Okay, then we've got against her. Now this fits that pattern: on the box, around the box, against the box. And if it falls into that pattern, it's a prepositional phrase. Always, always, always prepositional phrase. So you've got a preposition. Remember, the job of the preposition is to take a noun or a pronoun, pull it into the sentence, so a relationship between this word and something else. So in this case, what's the relationship between her and something else? Well, this is telling the relationship between the vendetta and her, right? It's a vendetta that's against her. So prepositional phrases are always modifiers. What's it modifying? It looks like it's a vendetta against her. It's telling what kind of a vendetta. Okay, in her, we know we've got subjects that do things. Objects have things done to them. Her is not doing anything here. Her is an object. Okay, it's the object of a preposition, but I'm just going to call it a no. And it's a pronoun, but you know what? I've run out of room to write here. Okay, but same pattern. We've got two independent clauses, too many sentences being joined by that conjunction. And that coordinating conjunction says these two things are equal, equal. And indeed, I could cross out this one. I'd still have a sentence here. I could cross out this one. I'd still have a sentence on the other side. Now let's take a look at this one. It's a little bit, it's similar, but it's a little bit different. He feels good when he eats candy. So try finding the verb or verbs. Yesterday he felt good when he ate candy. You can hear the words that change right there. Those are the verbs. Feels changed to felt. Eats changed to ate. Now is feel something you do? I mean, I guess it could be if you're like touching something to try and feel the texture or something. But in this case, this is like a being thing. He is good. He feels good. So this is a linking verb. Linking verbs show what you are. I feel good. I smell good. I look good. Okay, and then eats is pretty clearly something you do. So that's an action verb. Okay, so let's look at our subjects. Who or what feels good? He does. That's a subject. Okay, who or what eats candy? He does. That's a subject. And then we can take a look at the rest here. Okay, he feels good. Well, good is a little adjective describing he, right? And we could label it some different labels, but we're just, go ahead and just put your arrow, that'll do. Okay, we got a little adjective there. Okay, he eats what? He eats candy. Looks like we got a direct object there. Okay, then we've got this when. This when is joining these two little mini sentence parts, but it's not a coordinating conjunction. It's not one of those fanboys. Instead, we've got something different. We've got a subordinating conjunction. If I mark my clauses here, I've got he feels good. That's one little mini sentence. And then I've got when he eats candy. Again, it's kind of like another little mini sentence. The difference here is that, well, I could cross this part out and still have a sentence here, he feels good. If I tried to cross out this first part, When he eats candy could not stand alone as a sentence. When he eats candy, there's just a sense of incompleteness there grammatically. Now, why is that so? Well, it comes down to this word when. Now, when is a conjunction. It's joining these two clauses you can see, but it's a subordinating conjunction. Now, what does the word subordinate mean? Sub means under, ordinate is just like you think order, right? So if something's subordinate to something else, it's below something else in order. So what a subordinating conjunction says is that these two things in the sentence are not equal. They're not grammatically the same. One of them is an independent clause that can stand alone as a sentence, and one of them is a dependent clause, which can't stand alone as a sentence. Now, subordinating conjunctions are frequently, but not always, dependent clauses or subordinate clauses are frequently introduced by subordinating conjunctions, which are the words like since, when, while, although, after, because, before, if, and there are others besides this. But that's a pretty good list to get you going. Now, some people call these awoobis words, or New Writing will call them swabby words, but the swabby comes from the S, the W, the A, the B, and the I that you see here. Okay, now if I have one of these little conjunctions here, on one side I'm going to have an independent clause that by itself could be its own sentence. And the other side, I've got this less important dependent clause that can't be its own sentence by itself. The two things are not grammatically equal. One of them is more important in the sentence than the other. Let's take a look at another sentence that has a subordinating conjunction in. Okay, he feels sick when he studies grammar. Did I write that sentence? Why did I write that sentence? I love grammar. Okay, I could change the tense to find the verbs. He felt sick when he studied grammar. The words that changed: feels changed to felt, studies changed to studies. Okay, that's something you do. Okay, feels could be something you do, but here it's not like you're touching something. It's more like a being thing. He is sick. He feels sick. That's a linking verb. Okay, and then you say who or what feels sick? Well, he does. Who or what studies grammar? He does. All right, so yet again, I've got an independent clause here, and then I've got this dependent clause here. I could cross out this part of the sentence, and I would still have a sentence here. That means this part is more important than that part. Now, if I were to flip it and just cross out this part right here, when he studies grammar, again, it has that sense of incompleteness to it. Now take a look at this. We've got the exact same sentence, but we flipped the parts here. So the question is, if this when has been flipped over here, when he studies grammar, he still feels sick, is that still a joining word? It is. It's easier to think of it being a joining word when it sits in the middle between the two sentences, but either way it works. Either way, we've got the same thing going on here. We've got a verb, we've got a subject, we've got a verb, we've got a subject, and we've got the clauses. And whether or not I switch the order here, this clause can still be its own sentence. He feels sick. Again, that has a sense of grammatical completeness. Whereas when he studies grammar, again, we have the sense that there needs to be something more here. So it is a conjunction. It is joining them. Again, whether or not we arrange these two pieces, these two building blocks of this big sentence by putting this one on the tail end or in the front end, either way, again, the same thing is going on here. When I was introduced to the idea of independent clauses and dependent clauses, an analogy of a train made really good sense to me. In any train, you've got to have an engine. Maybe you've got two engines pushing. I'm thinking like the Thomas the Tank Engine stories where like one will come help out and push from behind or something. But you've got to have at least one engine, and that is your independent clause. I eat toast. Something that if you stripped away everything else in that sentence, you would still have something that could function and could move. Okay, I eat toast. Now onto that main core part there, that was redundant. I could add, a little dependent clause. Because food is good. I could add a prepositional phrase. I could add another dependent clause. I could keep tacking on a whole bunch of these. And again, as long as I've got at least one independent clause in there, my sentence should be okay. Now, the order that I put these cars in doesn't let's think of these cards as being building blocks that I could push around. So I could switch the order here and say, because food is good in the morning, when I wake up, I eat toast. Okay, or I could shift them around like this and say, because food is good, I eat toast in the morning when I wake up. Now, I can't say that you can always slide around building blocks at will, because if you do that, you can get your modifiers put in the wrong place. But that'll be a lesson for a different time when we talk about misplaced modifiers. Okay, the point is as long as I've got that core independent clause, at least one of them, then I can add all sorts of other parts onto the sentence, and my sentence should still function grammatically as a sentence. All right, let's look at one or two more examples, and we'll call it good. Okay, he didn't know the answer when the teacher called his name. So first, what are the verbs? He didn't know the answer. He doesn't know the answer when the teacher called his name, when the teacher calls his name. So if I put that into present tense, this word right here shifts, and this word shifts. He didn't know, he will not know. This is a help. You know what? I'm just going to say it. Okay, this is a main verb here. This is something you do, and then the did is a little helping verb, and you always have to have a did if you've got a not there, right, or a had or an is, but there's always got to be a helping verb for that not to latch onto. So anyway, you've got a little helping verb there. Okay, who didn't know the answer? He didn't know the answer. Okay, when the teacher called his name, who called his name? The teacher. That's our subject. Subjects do verbs. Objects have things done to them. Okay, now I could label all the parts here. He didn't know what. He didn't know the answer. That's a direct object. When the teacher called what? Called his name. Again, we've got another direct object. And then we've got an article modifying answer. We've got the modifying teacher. We've got his, which is a possessive pronoun, doing the job of an adjective, right? Modifying that. Okay, but what I'm really interested in here are the clauses. So let's just get rid of all the extra stuff. Okay, we've got a clause here. He didn't know the answer. When the teacher called his name, got a clause here. Which of these two is the main one? Which of them can you do without? Well, he didn't know the answer. I could put a period right here. I'd be fine. I'd have a decent sentence. Okay, when the teacher called his name, again, that has a sense of incompleteness to it. We expect something else. Now, as long as this is tacked on to the other one, it's fine. But if it were by itself, if we tried to treat this as its own sentence, we'd end up with a sentence fragment, which, not that people don't use them all the time in writing, but grammatically, they're incomplete and there are times when they're problematic. So this one here is our independent clause. This one here is our dependent clause. And we've got that subordinating conjunction right there, joining the two. The boy who sings gets all the love. If I change my verb tense, I've got the boy who sang got all the love. I hear two words changing, sings and gets. Now, gets is pretty clearly something you do. That's an action verb. And sings looks pretty clearly like an action verb as well, something you do. Now, this is a little odd because normally if we have a couple of verbs sitting next to each other, we have one action verb at the end and we have helping verbs. We could have up to like 3 helping verbs. But in this case, I've got 2 action verbs here. So what's going on? Well, let's take a look. If I say, who gets all the love? Well, the boy gets all the love. That's the subject for gets. The boy gets. That makes a little sentence, right? Okay, then I've got who sings. Well, who or what is doing singing? The boy is doing the singing. So this feels like it's kind of the subject for this. But you can't say the boy sings gets all the love. It just doesn't quite work. So what we do is we put this word right here in, and it functions like a little subject here for this word. And this is it's called a relative pronoun, and you can see that it's standing in for the word that just came right in front of it. So we don't have to say the boy who sings gets all the love. We just take that who and replace the word that came right before us. So I'll label that as a pronoun. What we have here is this little tiny clause tucked right inside the middle of our bigger clause. Now, if I were to cut this out, I'd have the boy gets all the love. I'd still have a perfectly fine functional sentence. So that tells you that this larger clause here, that's my independent clause. But tucked within that independent clause, again, I've got like this little baby clause, this baby sentence here. which isn't going to function as its own sentence. Who sings? I mean, if it were a question, that'd be different, but we're not talking about a question here. We're saying who sings. And you can see that this by itself doesn't mean much. It needs to be hooked into that larger sentence to make sense. So there's our dependent clause, again, tucked right into the big one. Whoops. All right, let's take a look at this one. I know you want it. Change the tense to find the verbs. I knew you wanted it. Got a verb here, got a verb here. Knowing is something you do. Wanting is something you do. So say, who or what knows? Well, I do. Subject, and it's a pronoun. Okay, who or what wants it? You do. Another pronoun. Okay, now of these, so we've got two little clauses here. I know, and then I know you want it. So I know is our bigger clause, and I could put a period right here and have a sentence. It'd be a little weird, but I know. You could make that a sentence. Now in this case, I mean, could you want it be a sentence on its own? It could, but in this case, you can see how this whole thing is actually, again, it's kind of, I'd say tucked inside the larger sentence, except it's not quite in it. It's tacked onto the tail end of this larger sentence. But think about what this little clause here is doing it. I know what, I know you want it. This whole thing here is acting as the direct object for this verb. I know cats, I know dogs, I know you want it. So here we have a case where we've got a little clause that's functioning as a noun. This whole little mini sentence is doing the job of a noun here. So I can label this as my dependent clause. Again, it's, for it to make sense, it kind of needs to be attached to that bigger piece. And again, it's the whole thing. It's doing the job of a noun. It's a noun dependent clause. Kind of cool, right? And then within this clause, again, we've got another like little baby direct object here. And I gotta say, I think it's kind of fun picking apart sentences and thinking what's going on. I'm sure you guys would enjoy it even more if we were doing like old school style, like where you do the branches out that go down like this, diagramming, if you've ever done that. It just takes too much paper. That's the problem with diagramming. Okay, here's the final one, and this is for you to do. I know you want it, but it is mine. First thing you got to do, find your verbs. Then find your subjects. Note that there's a coordinating conjunction there. You're going to have 3 clauses here, 2 independent, 1 dependent. See if you can label the pieces and see what's going on.